I'll start.
Mics.
All right. Yep, thank you. Excuse me.
Hello. Okay, that works. Does your thing work? Hello. Okay, that works.
All right. One sec. Let me put this in my pocket.
Wait. Should probably be standing up.
Is it recording?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Welcome everyone to the How to Make a Full Game workshop. Are you excited? Woo! Let's go. All right. So just a bit of, let us start off with what we'll be discussing today. We're just gonna go over outline of like a bunch of technical, art, design, music, planning, and commerce stuff in relation to games. Because this workshop is very literally gonna be about how to make a full game, and it'll introduce you to every aspect necessary. And it'll kind of be something like a roadmap, where it'll this silly bloody video I put on of like someone looking at a map. I wouldn't recommend sitting in a car like that. It's very dangerous. But yeah, this will give a general overview because I think you may be more experienced in music or art or programming. The idea of this workshop is for you to see everything related to say, okay, what am I weak at? What do I need someone to help with? What kind of people do I need on my team? So that you'll be able to focus on that topic to then create a full game. So before we start, I would like you to try and think about what your goals are in game development, whether you want to be a solo dev, whether you want to create your own team or join an indie team, whether you want to work in a AAA studio, or if you're just doing it for the love of the game. Because depending on which, don't move yet. All good. Depending on which one you want to choose, the way each concept, the way you'll look at each concept might be different. If you're planning to go AAA, for example, when you look at one of the subtopics, you might want to specialize in that. But if you're going indie or even solo, you have to recognize, okay, well, this is like so much stuff. What's like a reasonable amount for me to know? At this point, do I need to hire someone for this? Or will this just be one of the many things that I have to take on as an artist? Like instead of just doing like art, I have to take on a few of these other subcategories that fall under art as well. So think about really quickly where you want to be and who you want to be, and that will tie into everything. And try and tie everything we discuss back into that. So we have my friend Sujay here to start off with all technical stuff.
Okay. Hello. Okay. Firstly, I just want to say we're meant to have a Bluetooth mouse, so like one of us could just stand here, but we forgot it, so that's why there's going to be a lot of like me going there, him going here. Anyway, so I'm going to cover technical stuff, and it doesn't just mean like for programmers or like for people who are very specifically focusing on like the coding aspects of the game. It's something that anyone in the team should have some knowledge on, so that then when like your programmer, for example, is working on a game and you say, you know what, I don't really know anything about programming. I'm just going to let him do him or her do their own thing, right? But then at some point you find out, okay, well, some of the code crashed and now the game is like in an irrecoverable state. So you're going to have to wait like an extra 2 weeks to do whatever you were meant to do. something like that could be avoided if you knew about, say, version control, right? So these are just some small topics that you don't need to be super knowledgeable if you're not a programmer, but if you are one, it's definitely important that you should be able to know some of these topics. So yeah, one of the things in like programming is we do stuff not because it's easy, but because we think it's going to be easy. And that covers a little bit into scope, which we'll go in like later in the workshop. But some of the things, some of the fundamentals you should know like before kind of I talk about this stuff is you should know how to code, ideally. And you should know about what a game engine is and how to use that. I'm not going to be covering that. I'm going to assume that that's like prior knowledge, right? So I'll be talking a little bit about version control and systems design. So version control is essentially like what the name suggests. You have a game and has multiple versions, and what you're able to do is roll back in case something goes wrong. Roll back in case something goes wrong and like work together using that version control software. You also have systems design, which is a little bit about like planning your structure. It's not quite the same as like your entire game plan. It's more, think of it more as like a technical focused plan where that's what you as a programmer most likely will be caring about. Not like, you wouldn't be worrying about like theme or aesthetics. You'll just be worried about how the systems in the game interact with each other. So that's systems design. There's some other stuff about like physics, networking, and databases that I will barely cover on because that's not really the focus of this workshop. Okay, so we'll just get started with game engines, right? I did say I wasn't going to talk about how to use a game engine, but one of the questions we get a lot in this club is, what game engine do I use, right? And there's a lot of options to pick from. And when you start as a beginner, you wouldn't really know the best one to go for. So you would want to like get an answer, right? So firstly, I want to say that the choice of the engine isn't as important as some people make it seem. Like a good game doesn't hinge on the engine it's built on. It hinges on like the game design and the game idea itself, right? So it's not, the game engine doesn't make or break the game. That being said, you would want to pick a game engine that kind of synchronizes well or like works well with whatever idea you have, right? So firstly, I'm going to say, if you've just started game dev, right? You don't really know about what these new game engine stuff, you've never heard about these newfangled ones. All you care about is you just want to get started, right? You want a straight one-word answer, no nuance, none of that, right? I would say go with Godot. It's pretty fast, it's really lightweight, it's super easy to like install or set up. Documentation is a bit lacking, but there are a lot of guides on it, and because it's kind of the game engine for indies, right? You can get started up like on the ground running really quickly. So that's my one-word answer without any nuance. Obviously, if you're not satisfied with that, you want to know like, why did I just say that? And, why not say Unity or Unreal, right? That's where you're going a little bit into the nitty-gritty. So firstly, you should consider in a game engine what genres it kind of specializes with. For example, is it on this? Okay, it's not on the image, but RPG Maker is like another game engine that's fairly popular. And as the name suggests, it's specialized in RPG games. So you wouldn't be using that to make like, say, an FPS shooter, right? It's not what it's meant for. So you wouldn't want to try to like make hacks and things just to make an engine do something it's not really supposed to do, right? So that's genre specialization. Then there's visuals, and visuals here doesn't mean like the art. Well, it can mean it, but what it means more is like, take something like Unreal, right? Unreal is kind of the game engine for artists in the sense that it can do really hyper-realistic art, like AAA level art, right? But that also means that there is a lot of like stuff that you need to work around with if you wanted to make it in like a very programming style engine, okay? So I'm trying to think of like a game off the top of my head made in Unreal. I don't know, I can't come up with it exactly, but basically Unreal is like your game for art, right? You have Unity that's good for 3D development, and you have Godot that's kind of meant for 2D development, right? So that doesn't mean you can't switch them around. You can make 2D games in Unity, you can make the 3D games in Unreal, and Godot, sorry, and both of them have been made, and there are good games in both sides. It's just that when you start off, you kind of want to keep an idea of what game you want to make. Do I want to make a 3D FPS, a 3D RPG? Do I want to make like a 2D platformer game, right? And then kind of go off that. Ease of use is probably one of the most important ones, where if you're new, you want a game engine that's easy to use. That's pretty obvious when I'm like saying it out like that. But a lot of people immediately think, okay, Unity or like Unreal is the one where they make the AAA games, where they make like really good looking games. I'm going to start with Unreal, okay? And that's not to say you can't do that. It's just that the learning curve is pretty steep. So you might like suffer from burnout. You might think, why is this so hard? I hate game dev. I'm never doing this ever again. So that's why ease of use is important. So when you start with like Godot, for example, right? It uses, the scripting language it uses, GDScript, is very similar to Python, right? It's very beginner friendly compared to something like, say, C#, right? So if you're new and you want to, like, ease of use is probably the metric that you care about the most, right? Once you're more familiar with like your coding background and like programming languages, then you can start worrying about other metrics like visuals or resource availability. So resource availability here just means like, if I was stuck in some aspect of making my game in this engine, where would I go to for help, right? And you know, obviously your first step should be the documentation, right? That's like where you want to go. Unity has a lot of documentation. Godot, on the other hand, it's still relatively new compared to Unity. So there's some documentation that's missing in some of the newer aspects that they've brought up. Like I think if you do like animation and 3D animation, it's still very, very like to-do and scaffolding stuff. So yeah. Also, there's like YouTube, right? Because if you go to like how to make a game in Unity, you'll get tons of guides. Like there's so much stuff out there to make games in Unity, but something like Godot, there's still more, not as much basically, right? So I'm really comparing between Godot and Unity because those are the kind of the two most, I would say, standardized game engines that we have. I mean, you have like all the other ones, like you have GameMaker, you have CryEngine and stuff like that. But I'm just going to talk about these two because mostly when people ask us, it's like, do I pick Unity? Do I pick Godot? And why, right? So those are kind of the reasons why. And then lastly, right, if you're thinking about making a game and none of these engines really seem to work for you, right? One thing you can look towards is doing frameworks, okay? So one really popular game, Noita, it's basically this pixel 2D game where if you've played any like Falling Sand games or particle simulator games like that, it's like, for example, I put a little bit of water at the top, it touches some fire at the bottom, and then suddenly you have steam, right? It's like a simulation of life, I guess, but with pixels. Something like that isn't really, a lot of the development team behind that weren't able to find a game engine that really does that well. So what they did is they made their own framework called like the Falling Sand Simulator, I think, and that was hyper specialized for that game. They can suit it, like adjust it to suit their needs, right? It comes with a lot of extra extra effort and setup you have to do, but then you get a lot of customizability as like your reward at the end. Okay, so that's engines. The next thing I want to talk about is version control. So if anyone here has ever used Google Docs or like any online thing, most of the time they have some sort of version control, right? You have like cloud storage where, you know, as you make your changes, you'll see it like it auto-saved at this thing, and sometimes you might get like a little section that says version history, okay, and then you can roll back to your changes. That is basically version control. That's a form of version control, right? And like the thing suggests, it's a save point for your project. So if something like, say you're working on your game and the power cuts out and you didn't save, right? Like that is very, very bad if you don't have any version control, because that might mean your game is like corrupt and you can't do anything, right? But if you do have some sort of version control, you can always roll back, and then more importantly, it lets you collaborate with other people, because now you can have one person make some changes, right? And I'm going to talk about like how the exact specifics work, but they make some changes, they upload it to the cloud. Then you pull it, download from the cloud, right? And you can see those changes, and then you upload again, and then that like cycle of like uploading and downloading to the cloud is basically how collaboration works when it comes to coding. GitHub is probably the most famous form of version control. If you do CS, you've probably heard of it. So yeah, and knowing how to use GitHub well and getting other people, other programmers to use GitHub makes it so much better, because now you have a fallback in case something goes wrong. Yeah, so this is like just the very, very basics of GitHub I'm going to cover. So yeah, do we have the iPad thing? I'm just going to do like the little.
Yeah.
All right. Well, while you get the iPad set up, I'm just going to talk about like 4 main functions in GitHub and how GitHub basically works, right? You have your 2 areas. You have your local storage and you have your cloud storage, right? Obviously, as the name suggests, cloud is like up online in their servers. Local is what you have, your laptop, for example, right? Or your desktop. You make some changes, you put it to the cloud, right? In GitHub, this is known as pushing your changes, right? And when you like let's say someone else has done some work and they've pushed it to the cloud, to GitHub, right? Then when you want to download those changes, you're pulling in that data, right? So that's why, push-pull, pretty obvious. Yeah. Oh, is that working?
Yeah, just gotta zoom out.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, I will quickly just scoot here. All right, so let's say, okay, so yeah, obviously I have like these two areas, right? My local, they call it repository, my local repository and the remote repository. So what I can do is, let's say I'm working on some game, I've done some changes. What I do is now I push it to the cloud. So my data just goes from my local to the cloud, and this is known as a push, right? If someone else in some other local repository pushes to the cloud, right, I need to be as up to date as possible. So what I would do is once they've pushed to the cloud, I would pull the changes back into my local machine. So then I have the latest, sorry about my atrocious handwriting, by the way, but I have the latest changes, right? And that's like one form, that's one thing you should know, like push-pull, that's like the basics. But the next most important thing that GitHub offers is branching. So let's say, hang on, I just want to check, okay. Let's say I'm making a game, right, where like we're doing some progress. So let's say this is like version 1, version 2, version 3, right? Now let's say I have some work that I've added into this version 3, and I'm working with a friend. They also want to add some changes. So we both together try to work on version 4 at the same time, right? But one of us didn't pull in time, or one of us didn't push in time. So now you have like a lot of corrupting changes that like you need to fix, and that's like a lot of extra work. So one thing you could do is, if I am working on a completely different aspect of the game, right? Let's say we're making an FPS, right? I'm working on like the gun and the shooting mechanics, and my friend is working on the enemy mechanics, right? What I can do is I can branch out. So we can call one area, let's say this is like G for like gun, and S for like, sorry, how do I erase on this thing? Okay, yeah. E for like enemies, right? So while I work on my gun changes, my teammate can work separate, like in parallel with their enemy changes, right? And then in the end, once we're all done, let's say, yeah, okay, we're all done, then what we can do is merge these branches together, right? Usually, actually, what you'd have is you have this main branch. So this is like the final copy of the game. When I'm done, I would merge into this main branch at one point, and then later, wait, hang on, let me, yeah, okay. So I have, let's say, main over here. At some point, I merge, and then later, let's say this person's doing some more changes, and then at some point, they merge back into the main branch. This way, we're both working on stuff in parallel. So we're both getting things done, but we're not like being held back because of like corruption or like they've made some changes, I need to wait for them to pull or push, stuff like that. So this is where branching is super important. Later on, like at the end of the workshop, I'll show some examples, because we've done this in our workshops. For one of the beginner workshops, we had to make a demo, right? And this demo was in Unity, and that's a lot of work to get a demo on that. So when I was working with my friend for the Unity project, what we did is every feature that we wanted to push, we created it in a separate branch. So then at the very end, our main one has all the changes combined. Yeah, so that's just branching. Yeah, can you switch back to the presentation? Hopefully that's like the basics of branching. And at any point, if you have any questions, just feel free to shout it out, raise your hand, I don't care. Yeah, hopefully that loads. Okay, yeah, so that's GitHub. The next thing I want to cover in like a very, very low level sense is systems design. Yeah, okay. Basically, a systems design is just a plan, right? It's a more specialized type of plan, but in the end, all it is some sort of plan that you've made before you start actually running and like coding your systems, right? It's how your different game mechanics interact with each other, okay? And it can be in many forms. So these are like the more formal names for some of their this thing, but that doesn't mean you have to do it in this way. Like you could do a mind map for all it matters, and it still really counts as system design if you're keeping in mind how your game mechanics or game systems interact with each other. So like, let's say how my player's inventory system interacts with like the player's ability to pick up and equip items, right? Those are two systems, and I want them to interact in a certain way. Yeah, so core mechanics and how they link to each other. And one of the advantages of doing this is you can communicate to other people outside your technical team how you've decided to plan things, so they can kind of work in ways that, make it easier on your end as well. There's this one really interesting tweet that I saw, which I found really funny, and it kind of highlights why systems design is so important. So, hopefully it loads. Tweet. Okay, yeah. Programming, specifically game dev, is chaotic magic, and there are no rules. So you can ask a game dev, can a player summon a giant demon that bursts from the ground, an explosion of lava? And they say, yeah, sure, that's not any problem. And then you ask them, can the player just put a simple scarf on? And they'll be like, that might be a little bit too much work. And like, to someone who doesn't do game dev, this could be like, why, right? You would want to know why. And it all depends on how you've designed the systems of your game. So if I make my player character, for now, let's say I was making an RPG, right? And cosmetics were like not immediately thought of. So all I care about is how the player equips armor, for example, right? So the player has this one armor slot, and they can equip and remove armor whenever they want. Now, let's say like my team lead or my project manager, my ideas guy is like, oh, you know what would be cool if the player can equip a scarf, okay? If I have designed my system in such a way that like my armor system is linked to every other system in the game, what I would think is better is just to add some modification to my armor system that lets me equip scarves rather than making a whole other cosmetic system, right? Because ideally, the best way is to make this separate cosmetic system that has their own unique interactions. But if, let's say I'm a lazy game dev, right? I don't want to do extra work. All I would do is, let's say, okay, I have this piece of iron armor. What I'll do is I'll make a separate copy of this iron armor and attach a scarf to that iron armor. So we'll call this iron armor with scarf, right? And then I equip that. Suddenly, it's like I fixed the problem, there's no issues. And now my ideas guy, being like the annoying shit that he is, he's like, okay, I want to make this scarf blow when the wind goes like past the player, okay? And you know, normally armor doesn't do that. So now you need to make a way that this armor also interacts with the way the wind works, right? But you also need to make sure that your normal iron armor doesn't blow away with the wind. It's just this iron armor with the scarf attached, right? And now, again, being the annoying person that he is, the ideas guy is like, okay, I want to change the color of the scarf. Again, usually you can't dye your iron armor, right? So, but you want to make the scarf dyeable. So then you do this like iron armor with white scarf, iron armor with red scarf. This is all if you've done your system design in such an atrocious way that the only way you can like add more stuff is just make more and more spaghetti code is the term. So that's why systems design is important, right? You want to kind of isolate systems that are very different from each other and keep them separate. So then when you're adding new systems, it's not as much of a visual spaghetti is the best way to put it. So yeah, that's basically systems design in a nutshell. You want to think about how a system like movement interacts with a system like player animations, right? Because when I move, I should be able to move whether or not the animation really works, right? I wouldn't want to stop just because my animation was having some issues. That would annoy me as the player. Like I'm doing like a vital attack and suddenly, let's say my GPU is a bit bad, so my animation stops a little bit, right? That means my attack just didn't happen at all and I get like destroyed by the boss. I would be pissed. I would write a negative review on Steam, stuff like that. So you want to keep your systems as isolated as possible while still being able to work and communicate with each other. That's systems design in a nutshell. If you've done any CS, I think object-oriented software development or database systems, they kind of cover some of this in the UML and the ER relationship diagrams. So that's systems design. Is there anything else I should be covering?
I think that's it.
Yep. Okay. All right. Yep. That's. I'm gonna. Yeah. Sorry. Any questions in the technical thing like systems design? Yeah.
I have a question about version control. So Git works well with code, and you can resolve conflicts in editor. But how do you handle game engine related files like scenes?
Yeah. Okay. See, that's kind of an issue because like with Unity, for example, I think it has .scene or .unity. I can't remember exactly. And even like the slightest change in those kind of like critical files could mess up your entire scene, and then now you got to do everything from scratch. The way I would do it is, that's a good question. Let me just think about it for a second before. Because we had that same issue when we were working on like the beginner's intro like workshop, right? Where I would like move my, we made a spaceship game just for reference. I would move my planet a little bit to the left because I think that looks better, right? And then scale it up a bit. And then like, let's say I made the Earth. Now my friend, when he pulls the Earth from the main branch, his Earth is supposed to be in the center, but I moved it a little to the left. So there's a conflict with the scene files. And the scene files look like a bunch of gibberish, so you don't really know which one to keep. The way I would like kind of, well, it's a solution, right? Is all the strictly like code that's not related to your scenes, right? So like your .cs files in Unity or like your .gd script in your Godot, those are what you want to keep in your online repo. And then anything that's like related to like scene metadata and stuff like that, you can probably save each scene as a separate thing, right? So if I'm working on the scene, the first thing I would do is duplicate that scene, make my changes to that scene, but then my coding scripts, they can be attached to any scene that I want, right? As long as the coding script works, it doesn't matter what scene they're working on, right? So that local scene is a duplicate that I've made and edited stuff on, but the actual main scene is working fine. It's just that I use that local scene to test out my scripts. So now I can take those scripts and attach them back to the main scene in the final main branch, if that makes sense. It's not the best way. I don't really know if there's like this one solution fits all method for that one, but that's probably the way I would do it. Yeah. Any other questions with like, yeah, version control, systems design, any of that stuff?
I think there's something I could say on version control as well, which is my experience in Godot is 100% every change you have to make it by branching. Don't ever commit straight to main. It's the worst thing you can do. Everything gets corrupted. Everything messes up. Usually when you create a new branch and make the changes there and then combine it back with main stuff from main, it usually will go through without too many conflicts. But if there is a conflict in the scene thing, I just open it up and it's all a lot of like wacky goobly-doo. But eventually you get a sense for what the wacky stuff means. So
So your thing is just like look through the gibberish and find the pattern and then, okay, yeah, that works.
sometimes it works.
Yeah, no, yeah. If anyone has any way that they're like, through that game dev journey where they've tried to use version control and they've figured out some hacks for it, you can always just suggest that. We'll try doing that as well.
Well, I don't know if it's good for everyone, but normally when I develop in another branch, diverge from the main branch, I usually try to merge the main branch into my branch before I push my branch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So
that's also a way.
it's 100% working when it's pushed
Before
back
you
into
finally
main
push it
branch.
into the
Yes.
remote thing. Yeah, that's a good thing, I think, yeah.
But
I
you work
use
well.
GitHub like, yeah. And I think there's also like stuff where you can do like cherry picking where you want to do like some things, but that's a lot of advanced Git stuff that I don't even know that well, so I'm not going to talk about it, definitely. But yeah, any other questions? Okay, I think we'll go to the next section, which is arts, and that's going to be presented by Taha.
All right, thank you so much. All right, art, yeah. All right, so art is what makes a game interesting, right? Because without like the visual flair and attraction of art, the game, like people won't, if people like pass by and see your game on display or whatnot, they'll think, oh, what's this googly junk? And like, try another game that's more aesthetically appealing. So art is very important for the first impression of your game. And also just how nice it feels to like, as you're playing the game. So art has a really important impact. Now, I'm not gonna delve into stuff like drawing, painting, and 3D modeling. Those are like entire huge fields of their own. So I'll be looking, but there are a few things that you might wanna keep in mind once you try and put this into games. And so I'll start with styles and subcategories of art. Which you can pop. There's nothing on there because I'm relying heavily on the iPad for this one. Okay, hold on. This is, I'm gonna need to edit this.
Oh, that's the wrong one.
That's the wrong one. This one?
That's also the wrong one.
No, wait, no, 'cause there was an issue with the recording. So I'm just gonna.
You need to zoom.
How do I zoom out? The hell? Oh, there it is.
Lovely.
All right. Yeah, ignore that. That's just because just now when I was trying to do just now when Sujay was doing this, there was a issue with OBS. But now it's all good. Now it's all good. Why is it? What the hell is happening? Oh my god! What the hell? Okay. It's stable now. All right. So let's talk about styles and subcategories because Sorry. Um, there are a lot of different things like art related in games. Oftentimes, like a character artist, in a AAA context, a character artist may be different than an environment artist, may be different from a VFX artist. But as an indie developer, you're gonna need to, if you're going indie or if you're doing it solo, you have to do all of them. And so these are like some of the subcategories of art in games. And so you want to be very mindful of your scope, again, which we'll touch a bit later on, but that's what's very important about styles. Because what defines whether a game looks aesthetically pleasing or not isn't as simple as just, what's more realistic. The being able to define in advance what your style is and what you're able to make in time will make the aesthetic of your game more cohesive and better. Even if you can't do any sort of even if you can't do any realistic art, you can go for like the pixel art approach, for example, and make a really good game, even though it's not there aren't as the resolution's way lower than an incredibly detailed game. If everything's pixel art, it's cohesive and it all comes together well, the game will be good. Like the aesthetic of the game will be good. You get games like Dead Cells, Enter the Gungeon, which are pixel art games, but people really like how they look. People pass by it and really enjoy it. And so there's this like diagram that I like to draw. Where you can go for like something that's a bit more low res or high res. And picking something low res doesn't mean it's bad. But defining like, okay, I'm gonna do this and this fits within my scope is good, because if you aim for something high res but you don't have the time to commit to it, what ends up happening is you have a lot of like half-fledged assets that look really bad and work really bad together. And so on the high res end, you can get really good games like Red Dead Redemption 2. But that's made by a AAA studio, and you have to recognize that. If you are aiming for, something like, if you are aiming for like that AAA studio job, they do look for extremely specialized skill sets. You can get hired entirely not as an environmental artist, but as an artist focused on moss. That's not an exaggeration. But if you are indie and you don't have like a lot of resources, a lot of time, a huge team, it is better to go for a low res route, but there are still really good games that are low resolution. You can get things like Undertale, which is very simple pixel art, but the game, because everything like works well together, it's very cohesive. People love the game. People don't comment about like how trash it looks in terms of its like graphics and whatnot. You can get on the 3D end, there are a ton of games. If you know something like A Short Hike, if you know where it's kind of a bit more low poly, and it plays into that like there's a game at the edge of my mind, but I don't know. But there are some games that like play into that PS2 graphics kind of stuff, that play into low poly, that play into pixel art, that are aesthetically really, really good. And so focusing on like the style and recognizing that is really important, and recognizing what you can do with your scope. So that is this? I think it's this one. Okay, you'll see OBS for a split second. Yep, and that is it for styles and subcategories. So very important stuff. And if you don't have it defined and you overscope, that's what will make your game look bad. So next up, animation. Shoot, I forgot about this slide. Okay, we have an animation workshop actually just last week. My friend Sujay presented. And key things, Cliff Notes, is 12 Principles of Animation is your textbook to live and die by as an artist. Practicing and mastering each of those individual principles is key in making lively, really good animations. Unfortunately, I forgot to put an example here, but there's some stuff like one of the principles is wind up, because if you just have an animation happen randomly, it will feel like it'll feel jarring, it'll feel bizarre. And even from a game design standpoint, like if the player just sees like an animation randomly happen, they'll feel like it was undeserved or like random. But which is why one of the key principles of animation is wind up. Showing that you have a wind up before you have a punch is a really important aspect of animation. And as an artist, that's a really key thing. But there are a few alternative ways to do animation, which is a bit more like programming intensive, which I will look into a bit more in the next slide. But you have areas where you can do procedural animation that happens through code and whatnot. That links very nicely into technical art. So technical art is kind of like a cross-section between animation and programming. And like the technical, I mean, it has technical and art next to it, so it's kind of links in there. But these involves things like integrating art into the engine, making sure it runs smoothly. If you're a technical artist in a AAA team, for example, you're responsible for checking up on the 3D models of the artist and seeing if it's too high definition and will impact performance. You're also in charge of like rigging, which is silly goofy stuff combining like 3D models into like code and whatnot. There's procedural art, which is art randomly generated throughout code. That's not AI. I am not a supporter of AI art, but it is something like in Celeste, for example, the hair was procedurally generated. That was so that the hair could respond to the wind, whether you're dashing, it could change colors and be special and whatnot. But procedural art helped because having to individually draw like, each frame of each possibility of hair, depending on if you're going left, right, up, down, is a ton of work, while it's easier to just code it in. There's things like particle effects you can do within your engine. There's things like, rigging twice. And then things like shaders and post-processing, which adds a layer of how the assets in your game are rendered. And so this is kind of a mix. If you're into like programming and art, this is something you can look deeper into. But even if you're looking at it from an indie scale, just at a very surface level, having an understanding of these things can really up the polish in your game. Okay, next up is that. Oh my god. All right.
Any questions?
Any questions on art? Oh shoot. I didn't cover some things like character design, unfortunately. But yeah, that falls a bit under like character art and like general art. But yeah, are there any questions on art?
What do you recommend? Which art form do you recommend for beginners?
For beginners, if you're new to art, definitely pixel art is like the most friendly and accessible. 100%. You can look into, if you do have a bit more of an artistic background, you can look into, just doing like digital art or whatnot. But even then, there's some areas where I think pixel art helps a lot if it's your first foray into animation, where like having to, if it's your first time doing like frame by frame stuff, it can be like really repetitive and it'll take a ton of time if you're also like illustrating every image. So starting off with pixel art first to get an idea of how many frames should I make and in-betweens and post-to-post animation, and so you don't waste too much time once you do develop into making full 2D art. That's the thing. But yeah, it's always good to start with more low resolution stuff if it's your first time. But there's also a lot of like good tutorials online if you're bored of that and you want to do something more interesting and more challenging.
I just want to say for the pixel. Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Give it a
Okay.
sec, yeah.
Sorry. I just want to say for the pixel art thing, right? The fact that you have a low resolution canvas means you have to decide what details you want to keep, right? So if I'm doing something like 8 by 8 or 16 by 16 pixel art, right? That's 16 by 16 is 256 pixels. I get to be able to draw my entire character or whatever I'm drawing, right? If I want to keep things consistent. So what that means is if I want to add like some detail, like the button on a jacket, right? I need to realize that those buttons take up pixels that I could be using to show some other form of detail. So as a beginner, it helps you realize like what motions and what are the characteristics of a character. So like obviously, you know, when you're creating a humanoid character, the limbs are probably the most important part, even more important than the head, because the limbs kind of signify what pose the character is in. Even if you can't show a lot of facial expressions well using the pixel art like 16 by 16 canvas, if you can use the limbs to like get the main movement across, and that's probably the most important part. Obviously, if you're doing like a visual novel, you would allocate more of your pixels to the face, right? And maybe some visual novels, all they do is just show the face in pixel art. You have like just the portrait of the character, because in that, the facial emotions matter way more than like the motion of the character. So pixel art is good in the sense that it limits you and makes you think what is important and what should I keep and what shouldn't I. Yeah.
All right, nice. Okay.
Questions?
Yeah. Any final questions? All right. On to music. So, programming makes a game work. Art makes a game interesting and aesthetically pleasing. Music makes a game immersive. So if your game doesn't have good music or good audio, it'll be difficult for someone to really feel like they're in the game. Really, it adds so much more emotional connection. Now, I wouldn't be talking about making music like from scratch, like composition, production, mixing, mastering, or just fundamental sound effects. But I will cover interactive music sound design. I'll quickly talk about that. If you're interested in this stuff, search it online. Because it is, music is its own field. It's a huge field in entertainment. You have to learn a ton of stuff. There's a ton of music theory and whatnot. But sound effects, there's a few things you can do. There's a few free online programs like SFXR, which allow you to randomly generate some kind of chiptune sound effects, if you would like that. There's also online libraries where you can get really good, high-quality sound effects for free. There's this one that I got called Soundly, which I can just get really good gunshot sound effects, nature sound effects, and it's really high quality.
I might just show them quickly SFXJR, so I can show you what he means by you can create your own sound effects. So if I quickly go,
yeah, they have a website version. Yeah. Oh yeah.
SFXJR, I believe. Okay, wait, that's not.
Maybe JSFXR.
Yeah, that's probably it actually. Yeah. Okay. So what this means is it lets you create sounds using just changing different properties, right? So for example, if I want to sound, I'm just these are all just different bit bit crushed or what you call bitmap sound effects, and they're all I can just change small things. You have to change the way the sound works. All these really nice retro-y sound effects. That's enough of that. Basically, the more important thing is these are all since they're randomly generated in a sense, you don't really, they're all once you make a sound that you like, you can kind of look at the things and tweak it ever so slightly without doing a lot of extra audio processing and stuff like that. And then you can just download them as .wav files and just put them straight into your code. So I would really recommend going to this site if you're trying to make these 8-bit pixely retro style games. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Now I will cover interactive music, which is when you're actually implementing the music into your game. there will be a few areas where you have the opportunity, instead of just playing the soundtrack like you're pressing play on Spotify, making the music react to what the player does. And so I have this example here in Super Mario Galaxy. Pay attention to the music.
I think the firewall kind of ruined that. Let me
Just go back like 10 seconds. Yeah, that's good. And so you can see from there, when Mario was swimming under the water, the music felt a bit more dampened. It felt a bit, yeah. And then once he left the water, like the high ends felt a bit sharper, and it really changes. It really brings you along into the change of Mario leaving the water, going onto the plains. And you can press play again. So this is now a mini game where the faster Mario collects the music notes, the faster the music plays. And if he stops, the music will stop as well. Alright. And I mean, this game is like a masterclass in interactive music. There's so much embedded throughout it, because Nintendo hires their musicians and sound designers in-house. But it is just really, it is way more immersive and, just having some simple interactive music in your game is night and day in how it pulls in the player. These are a few programs with making interactive music, Fmod or Wwise. You can look into which game engine your programmers are using to see which one works better. I know with Unity, I think Fmod is preferred. Yeah, it really adds a lot. And using the actual programs is quite simple from a musician standpoint. All right, next one. And the next one is sound design. Now, wait, don't play it yet. Now, sound design is all about just generally how all the sounds interact with the game. And so it talks about, it involves, that interactive music aspect, but also sound effects, and also actually like having it react to the game world, whether like the room is small or big, how that impacts the echo and reverb of the game. Whether, it's raining or the floor is wet or it's dry, and if there's like nature stuff going around. But that would fit more for like a very detailed game. But if you're in a setting where your game is very simplistic, kind of chiptune, kind of retro-ish, that will also have an impact, because you don't want extremely realistic sounds in like a Game Boy game. So you can give this a shot. This is a very high quality sound design in Red Dead Redemption 2. Full screen? That's alright. You can kind of, hear the footsteps of the horse, the water flowing, the birds flying, the rustling of the leaves. Even just like the gravel on the ground. It really deeply pulls you into the game. All right. And that is it for kind of audio. Do you have any questions? Good? All right. Moving on is design. So, again, programming, all the technical stuff makes your game work. Art makes your game interesting. Music makes your game immersive. Design makes your game fun. So some of the fundamentals in design is design thinking. Now, there might be a bit of confusion because a lot of times like people will mix up art and design, but design is all about recognizing the player's interaction with the game, how the player will feel when they're playing the game. Music kind of does convey emotions and immersion, but design is about like how the player will feel. It's a bit different because you want to look at like how the player will engage and interact with the game and how they will feel after playing it, instead of like just simple immersion and emotions that music conveys. So design thinking is about like recognizing, okay, who is my audience and what aspect do I want to convey here? Enter the Gungeon, does everyone know the game Enter the Gungeon? Does anyone not know? That's all right. Does anyone, I'll do Minecraft. I think a lot of people know Minecraft. But like in Minecraft, for example, when you're in a crafting menu, like they recognize that their audience is the general public. And back in the day, nowadays there's the guidebook in Minecraft, but back in the day there wasn't that. And so if you wanted to know how to craft something, you'd have to search it up on the wiki, or you wouldn't even know what you could craft. But recognizing that their audience is like global and they have like 2-year-olds playing Minecraft, they added in like the guidebook, which allows you to search and quick do all your crafting recipes and whatnot. And beyond just that, there's like recognizing when there's a problem between what you have and your target audience. If they're not feeling the way you want them to, or you're not doing the thing you want to, design is about recognizing, okay, that's a problem, what can I do to fix it? Two of the most important things in design is prototyping and playtesting. Prototyping is creating your game idea first in a more low-stakes version to see whether it's good or not. And so if I have like a game idea, one thing I can do is make a really simple version that's like very thin. It only has like the bare bones mechanics. And if I give that to someone and they enjoy it, that's how I know, okay, this is a good idea. But if not, then I might have to change a few things about the idea. And that's why like that links to playtesting, because you can't just think what the person's gonna feel. You actually have to like put it in front of their face for you to recognize whether it's right or wrong, whether like things are working or not. This is one really good quote from the developer of Subnautica, where they really didn't want to add weapons into their game. They were in a very no violence mindset after their previous game was very like gruesome. So they gave their game so they developed the game Subnautica, and there were these like leviathans and whatnot, and they gave it to playtesters, and everyone who played it said, this game is too hard, this is horrible, I feel like I should be able to do something here. And something interesting they did for playtesting is they in the game, you could press a button to say, hey, there's something I want to change here. And it will immediately send a message to the developers. But not only does it say what you want, it'll also send details on your location, your status in the game, and whatnot. And so what they realized was people were mostly complaining when they got to the leviathans and the deeper part of the ocean. Subnautica is like a game where like the world is an ocean, and you have to explore it and whatnot, and there's like dangerous fish. And once you like got closer to the leviathans, which is like the big, deadly, really bad fish, everyone would like say, hey, there's an issue, hey, there's an issue, hey, there's an issue. And the game designer of Subnautica said, players are really, really good at recognizing when there's a problem, but they're horrible at recognizing what the solution is. So instead of adding guns, they realized that what they could do was add in a flare system where you could throw out a flare that would distract the leviathan and you could go in. And compared to guns, which say if you added in a gun mechanic, that would like completely change the tone of the game. And also you'd be able to just go in and like shoot everything and there'd be nothing to fear anymore. But since the game is, it's meant to be a bit scary, it's meant to be like, delving into the depths of the ocean, which is like all mysterious and whatnot. Only like being able to throw a flare, which distracts the thing for a little bit, but you don't know how long it's gonna last, and it may always come back to you, still keeps that core element of the game, that core element of horror, without while solving the solution. Now, I'll cover. That's why prototyping playtest is important. Now I'll cover accessibility. Wow, I'm so sorry. This is not a very accessible slide, but. With accessibility, it's really important also as a designer to try and make your game playable for as many people as possible. So things like remappable keybinds does that, where instead of just having your controls WASD, being able to allow the player to change that to their preferred playstyle is, as a player, it's a really nice experience. But not only that, there are some people who like to play games who are who like have like I forgot the word, but like they're limited. Maybe they're in a wheelchair or something. It's not a very professional way of delivering it, but they'll be able to map that into the buttons on their devices to be able to play the game in a way that's enjoyable to them as well. Things like having settings that can make the game more friendly for people with color blindness is really good as well. Recently, the game Peak just got an update where they added like a more color blindness safe mode. And not only does this help people who have disabilities, but it also allows, it will also almost always make things better for everyone else. The quality of life of playing the game improves a ton. All right. Moving on to narrative design. Well, I have my friend Jasper to go up. Yeah.
So unfortunately, I'm here to kind of like make everything we've already done no fun at all. Because the thing about narrative design is it's really annoying and it doesn't integrate well into your project, which is why the narrative designer, probably one of the least popular people on the team. So they basically cover everything and nothing at the exact same time, because every aspect of everything you've already done, so music, animation, whatever, implicates the narrative, and the narrative implicates it. So it's kind of this really weird sort of chicken or the egg situation where you kind of go, okay, I have these sorts of goals for whatever the narrative of this game is, but for example, let's say the art style is a certain way, that's going to create some sort of tone for my game that might clash with my goals for the narrative. Same thing about the music. If the music is very, very, peaceful and lovely and whatever, and I suddenly want the game to be, to have these dark themes of, I don't know, like the evil within the human spirit, there's a bit of a clash there. So as a narrative designer, your job there is to then go, hey, music person, you're not allowed to do your job. I'm here to dictate what your job is instead. Doesn't really work in most team settings because, if you have particularly AAA studios, you tend to have like very small teams on narrative versus very big teams on everything else. So it's this kind of I guess, bit of a power struggle between the narrative needs to be informed by the tone and of the art and everything else, but it also needs to be able to inform the tone of everything else because they have their own goals to achieve. And it's a bit of a tug of war, personally, really. So there's kind of two approaches that normally happen. You either start with these are our goals for the narrative in pre-production and then sort of let everything else be based around that, or the more common approach in pretty much every AAA studio, which is you make the game, then you bring the narrative designers in like the last 2 months and say, hey guys, make a story! And you end up with a lot of very generic narratives that are kind of shit because they're based around stuff that's already been, well established for several years in the production process. So yeah, it's about taking tonal cues from other aspects of the design. Interesting term in narrative design called ludonarrative dissonance, which is when, for example, you do that situation I described before where you make a story that really does clash with everything else that's already been established and it just doesn't really work. And yeah, so it kind of creates this conflict. But as, if you do have a coherent vision for the narrative, you can use it to inform other aspects of the design in an interesting way. Take, for example, Papers, Please, which has a very particular, which is a solo dev, I'll add, so I guess it makes it much easier when the narrative designer is also designing everything else. But That game has is about living under an authoritarian government and being a functionary for it. So it has, fairly, I guess, a fairly austere ambiance to it and a very oppressive atmosphere, and that shows up in the art style because you can see, we've got this very chunky pixel graphic, people who look really depressed, etc., etc. So it all sort of melds together really nicely, but you need to have a very coherent vision for how you're going to achieve that if you want that to work. And it shows up in the music of that game as well. Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. So, user interface or UI. It's like here I'm talking about UI for video games specifically, but UI as a whole is like a really, really big thing in design. It's like how people interact with your piece of software or medium or whatever it is that you're making. That's hence the term user interface. And a lot of the principles for UI in video games uses the same principles for UI in like a general sense, right? UI or UX, where UX is user experience. So you have stuff like meaning and functionality, right? When you add a UI element into the game, let's say a health bar, right? What does it represent, right? Why am I adding it? Because the thing is, you can add like UI elements for almost any like property or any like statistic the player has, right? If I was making a game, let's use the example for Subnautica, right? I could make a small statistic, right, that shows me how far I am from the nearest Leviathan, right? But the thing is, just because I can do that doesn't mean I should, right? What is the meaning? Why would I do that? Almost every UI element has some implications with it. If I give you an indicator to the nearest Leviathan, right, it can work both ways because now if you have players that are like trying to optimize the game, trying to get like to the end as soon as possible and like avoid meeting all these Leviathans, the moment they notice that a Leviathan is coming close to them, they're just going to run away, right? They're not even going to explore the area, or even if they are, they're going to make sure the Leviathan is far, far away before they do that, right? And then now suddenly Subnautica, which is famous for being like this game that like gives you a fear of the ocean, is now just a game of like, it's like kind of like a hunter-chaser game where the moment the Leviathan comes close, you leave that area, find some other place, right? On the other hand, you could have players that are like super daring, right? That style of players where when they see that the Leviathan is closer, they kind of want to see, okay, what is this thing that's approaching me? Why do I have a meter for that, right? And they go and check it out. So every UI element does have some sort of implication into your main gameplay loop and how it affects certain types of players. The other thing is functionality. So like you can create a UI element, right? But you want it to be functional in the sense that it gives you some extra information because that's usually what UI does, right? UI is kind of, as I said, the balance between immersion and information, and I'll talk more on that in a second. But I can make a health bar in like a bunch of different ways, right? And the most common one of like displaying health is like literally, as I said, a health bar. So where you have like 100 all the way on the right and 0 all the way on the left. And when that bar reaches 0, you're dead. There are other ways that some AAA games do it, where as you take more damage, you get blood splatters across the screen, right? And when your health goes really low, like basically your entire screen fades to black because there's just too much blood. And then, or for example, your character starts panting when they're really tired, from like when their stamina is low. So these aren't like direct GUI elements in all cases, but they give more information to the player, right? And the thing of like functionality is I can make a I could make a UI like that, just a big text, right, that just says 0 to 100. That's still technically giving me information for the player health. It's not very functional in the sense that the way I get that information might not give the intended, the intended experience that I want. Because if I see a number that just says 5, I'm like, okay, I probably should be careful, run away. But if I see blood splattered all over my screen, now it means I can't even look at some like corners of my screen. It makes it a lot harder. It tells me, the game is telling me that, okay, being at 5 HP is not a good thing to be at. You want to probably get your health up, escape from whatever danger you're in, stuff like that, right? And UI is the balance between immersion and information in the sense that if you've played like, I'm trying to think of like an example. If you've played, Minecraft, right? You've played Minecraft, and some of you may know that there's an F3 button that you can do that brings up this debug screen where you get basically all the information you'll ever need about the game, right? You can see like what coordinates you are exactly, where you're facing, the nearby entities and mobs that are, what biome you're in, all that. It covers almost like your entire screen, right? You can't really play the game well in that state. Now imagine if the F3 mode was the default mode, right? You see all that information the moment you start playing, and it's so overwhelming that you can't really pay attention to the game, right? And this is known as Well, you can, the actual, like, I think, formal word is cognitive load, where the player or like any person like operating some sort of software can only really keep track of around 6 to 7 objects at a time, right? If the more UI elements you add that are moving around, that are changing, the more the player has to like pay some attention to them, and the less attention the player will pay to like whatever you actually want them to look at, right? Like the enemy, for example. So that's why like the more UI you have, the less immersion you have. But that being said, right, you could have games where you don't have any types of heads-up display or HUD at all, right? And waypoints technically are a form of UI, right? They give you some extra information about the game, not through the enemies, not through like the direct systems. There are examples of games where they don't have any waypoint at all, okay? And like I think Metroidvanias usually, like some Metroidvanias have very few of these waypoints, because the goal of Metroidvanias is for you to explore every area, try to see what you can and cannot reach. It isn't to just go from point A to point B as soon as you can. If you take this with an example for open world games, right? The problem with open world games is that they're so big that the player will have no clue where to start going towards if they aren't given some sort of explicit direction, right? Usually that's in the form of the narrative, where they say, okay, this big bad lives in this huge castle in like this big mountain, right? And you can see that mountain from like no matter where you are. So now you have like some goal. But if you don't have something like this, waypoint is a way that gives the player information while at the same time slightly breaking the immersion. It's kind of like a fine balance that you have to do. If you go too much on the immersion side, the player doesn't know what to do. They have no information. If you go too much on the information side, the player just gets overwhelmed and they can't really play the game to the best of their ability or the way that you intend them to play the game. Right, so design conventions are another big thing. If anyone has seen like any AAA game and you've seen a red barrel, like 99% of the time you shoot that thing, it explodes, right? That's a design convention. And now if you were probably like, say I made a game, right? And you know what? I'm like this lone wolf that I want to do like challenge like the design stereotypes. I make red barrels that don't explode. They in fact heal you, right? If I don't explicitly say that they do that, no player is going to like immediately, like, okay, if I give the player a gun, right? And let's say these red barrels, they only heal you if you're within a certain range, right? If I see these red barrels, I'm not going to go right up to them and shoot them to try to heal myself. I'm going to stay far away, try to shoot them near enemies, for example, because in my head, from all the games that I've played, the established convention is that these barrels explode. So I'm going to end up healing these enemies. I'm going to be pissed at the game, negative Steam review, yada, 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 right? So you want to try to use these conventions to your advantage because they are information that the player has already learned. You don't have to teach them that now, let's say, red barrels heal enemies. Everyone already basically knows, everyone who's played these sort of games knows that red barrels explode. Another like important design convention is probably yellow paint. In some of these open world games, when you see yellow paint, it's kind of like an indicator that that's the direction you should be going, especially in like these puzzle or platforming style games. So design conventions basically give you information for free because everyone else who's already played these games know what to expect. You should use those expectations wherever you can. That being said, you know, there are times where you can challenge these conventions. It's just that every new convention you break is added information that the player has to relearn, right? So keep that in mind. Okay, so that's kind of UI in general. Yeah, I think that's, do I have to cover anything more?
I think that is it for design.
Okay, yeah, so break time. Big break time.
Yeah, you can ask
Yeah.
a question.
Any other questions if you have about like the UI, narrative, like design, anything about like just game design in general? We also do have a game design workshop that we ran like I think the fourth week or fifth week of the semester. So if you want, you can check more information in that as well. But any other questions now? Any discussion? Anything like that? Either way, there's going to be like a break for like 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
One thing I wanted to add, if you're interested in game design in particular, is that if you do take on the role of the game designer, you do kind of have to have a general understanding of programming and art as well, because a lot of game design is very theoretical, but without taking that theory into practice, you won't really be able to understand it as much, or you wouldn't be able to apply it as much. And well, you could do stuff like playtesting and prototyping and try that. It helps a lot to be able to have that programming, like basic programming and art knowledge, and try a bunch of design ideas in game jams. If you're interested to learn more, there's a few books that are really recommended on game design. That you can hit us up on Discord and I'll send it to you. But yeah.
But yeah, we'll be having like a break for a few minutes. If you want, like, feel free to chat with the other people on your table, ask them any questions you've had, or even if you want, you can just come up to us and ask us stuff. But yeah, we'll probably get back into it at like 6:55 maybe. So that's a break of like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a short break. And then we'll cover planning and commerce afterwards. This is off. There's Ethan. Oh well. Okay, I'm gonna.
Relaxing music.
Animal Crossing? Oh shoot, wait, no.
That's right.
I'll be back.
What's the point of having an HD soundtrack to start?
That could be good.
You don't need that high quality.
Either like audio sound. What are your names?
My name is Yulan. You can call me Joseph.
Yeah.
How can
What are you?
I feel like I just admire the way that like kind of makes it seem like in a casual sense. It's not like switches.
Even though you like have an ongoing.
I think maybe like
I used to. I majored in music.
because I wanted them to kind
I mastered it now. And I did like a game for my final project.
for like next year.
Yeah.
Maybe
I study art management now, so it's kind of related, I guess, like to the
right.
and like we don't really talk about games, even though it's like sort of creative.
If that works, because yeah, we'll see when. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, I just participated in the last game during this semester. And then anyone interested in the game jam? I think it's an exam period. So
Oh, I remember my friend was nice. She had that data as that man. I was like, that's so weird. What is data?
but it's still not very last week.
Nothing.
No, it's 26. Yeah. So we have
What's
a
your
game
name?
jam.
Okay, Akila.
Yeah, next week.
Sorry?
Interested?
Oh, I just found this in Melbourne Central and thought it's cute.
Yeah, so that, no one can promise.
They have like, it's in JJ's and they also have this.
Wait, you late taking on is that like? It's like I don't want to fucking handwrite for that.
Like some random
That
games.
is valid. Like if I make a single.
What's your idea?
My name is Yulan, so you can try it.
I think it's a little bit almost.
As an orange.
I see.
I'm a game designer.
I don't know. I just put the fries in the bag, man.
It's like so not particularly good in the design related. I usually leave the actual creation of assets to someone else as well. Not able to design anything. Red block is what appears on the screen. Someone else does that later. What do you guys have? Just to yeah. I was a bit late.
So what field are you interested in the process of game dev?
Personally, I'm programming. That's why you call games. Currently, I work for a streamer group center. Excitement.
Oh.
I do all the graphic stuff.
instead of making the backend server pretty much like the systems design. Are you developing anything related to their multiplayer servers? No, but I'm afraid he tells me the stuff that I can and can't do. Not break that. I'd be asking to make it. Just their editors. Yeah. Greatest of There's good experience in at least some of the systems, like the latest stuff by remaking the systems so the efficiency we make very quick correction system ready for the right spots. Easy. Yeah.
Sorry. Do you consider?
What are you working on? I do like the Among Us ones. Oh, Among Us.
Alright, I gotta go.
Hello, what's your name? Edward? Okay, love. It's actually in Melbourne Central. I don't know if it's still there. It's at JJ's.
Oh, you got it from Melbourne Central?
Yeah,
Wow. What stop is it?
it's JJ's.
JJ sells it.
It's close to the Poke Bowl store. There's Poke Bowl, there's chat time. Yeah, chat time.
I only
It's
spoke
right
to
there.
I didn't know this.
It's an image of me.
I remember they had a concert year one.
Yeah.
That's cool.
What do you do?
Like doing the game jam?
Yeah, gaming or like studying.
I'm a musician. So I was in charge of like, I have a game jam team of like 3 people. And I'm in charge of just anything like sound.
Hello. Okay. All right. I guess we'll get started with the next section. It's just about planning, and because again, like I said, planning is like the most important thing for your game. So I'm going to cover the first one, which is about scope, which is basically how big are you making your game? What do you want to include? Anything that's in your scope is what you're doing. Anything that's outside your scope, you're not doing that, right? There's so that quote is basically from one of our GMC reels, but basically, okay. No, it's fine. It's not educational content. But basically, right? This is like a tale as old as time. Okay, you have a game developer. They played GTA 5. They look at how many like copies it's sold. They're like, all right, you know what? Overnight, I'm gonna make GTA 6. Okay, it's out. Well, actually, GTA 6 is out now. I can't even use that anymore. I'm gonna make GTA 7. Okay, and those are words right before the disaster that is burnout happens, because you cannot make a game that is made by a AAA studio that took years to make in a couple of days, months, or even years. Okay. I wanted to reference something. It's not in this, but basically there was this one Reddit post where I think this 26-year-old was basically, they went to the game dev subreddit and they were like, guys, I've been working on this MMO, this massively multiplayer online game featuring like dragons and super realistic magic for the last 2 years, all by myself. What do you think? And what she posts are just the concept art. She doesn't have anything, like no systems, right? And some people clown on it, which is kind of, it's justifiable, because the thing is, when you, it is so easy to underestimate how much time it takes to create something, right? Especially a video game. So yeah, if there's like one sentence you need to take away from this entire like slide of me talking, is don't overscope, okay? When you have an idea, right? Think about how long it'll take you to make that idea, and not just be like, okay, you know what? Oh, I need to implement player movement. Okay, that shouldn't take me too long, maybe like 2 to 3 hours. It will not take you to 2 to 3 hours if that's your first time doing player movement, okay? Even if you're really good at player movement, it might take you a lot longer than that if you want to make the movement feel good, right? And the thing is, the pitfall is that scope estimation comes with experience. So someone who's never made a game is going to have really bad scope estimation. So they're going to try to make a game that they definitely can't make in that whatever time frame they've decided. They're going to realize, oh my God, I'm terrible at making games. They're never going to pursue game dev again. So it's like a vicious negative cycle, right? But the other way is you make a game, you make it small, you like stick to like what you know or the very basics. Then you learn like, okay, some aspects, like let's say making the main menu, okay, it'll take me maybe like an hour to 2 hours to make the button for the menu, right? Now I know that. So next time I make a game, I need to remember to allocate 2 hours to make the main menu, right? And then I make some other aspect, and then I realize, okay, that takes some amount of time. And every single iteration, every new game I make, or every like update I make to a game, it makes me better at realizing what, how long certain aspects take, right? So that's important. And this is one strategy, but I came up with it on the spot, so I take it with a grain of salt. But basically, to think of the simplest game you know, okay? In my case, it would be Pong, but like it doesn't matter. It can be any video game that you've played that's like incredibly simple, right? And firstly, try making that game, okay? Because even like Pong, you think it's okay, yeah, it's just a ball bouncing around. There's so much more like that meets the eye, especially in terms of like game programming, but like everything else. So first you have these two pedals, right? One of them is controlled by the player. So that means you need to take in keyboard or like whatever input. You need to take in input and translate that to moving the paddle up and down, right? You have collision. The ball needs to hit and bounce off against those paddles. You need to have some sort of scoring system where the ball needs to detect if it goes past the edges, you're increasing the score. You need to have a win condition, a lose condition. You need to have a main menu. You need to have all these extra stuff that wouldn't immediately come to mind, right? So even a game as simple as Pong has this complexity. And now I want you to like make Pong, see how long it takes you to make Pong. Okay, like it could be any game, but I'm just gonna go with Pong here. See how long it takes you. Then whatever game idea you do have, think of how much more complex that game is compared to Pong, right? And like if I'm making, for example, let's say I'm making Flappy Bird, right? I would say that game is maybe like 4 to 5 times more complex than Pong, right? Because now you have to deal with like gravity, you have to deal with like hitting the edges of the pipes, getting your bird just to go right between those pipes, all that kind of extra stuff, right? So then however long it took me to make Pong, it might take me 4 to 5 times as long to make Flappy Bird, okay? And on the best case, always go for like the upper bound, right? If I think it might take me 4 to like 8 days, I'm gonna assume it takes me 8 days, okay? Because better to